Hello, and welcome to the National Alliance for Partnership and Equity Building Trust webinar that we're doing in partnership with the Million Women Mentors. My name again is Claudia Morell, and I am the Chief Operations Officer for the National Alliance for Partnership and Equity. I want to thank you for joining us on this webinar. I think we have a small but powerful group joining us. However, we do have quite a large number of folks signed up, so I'm assuming as people jump on, they'll join us, and wanted to just let you know that you are welcome to ask questions at any time as we go through this presentation. This webinar, as I mentioned, is in conjunction with the Million Women Mentors Initiative and as part of January's Mentoring Month activities. We'll be talking a little bit about some of the work that NAPE is doing around mentoring and how we are connecting our work with micro-messaging to the Building Trust, to the mentoring program that we support our work with micromessaging. So I'm just gathering my notes here. I wanted to let everybody know that Greg Nagy, who is providing technical support today. So if you have any challenges, just let us know around the technology. I want to call to your attention just a few technical elements. One, there's a chat box at the bottom of your screen. Greg has typed a note in here that you can ask questions there in the chat box. It should be at the bottom of your screen. There is a button on your top right of your screen that hopefully says full screen. You can tap on that button and it will create a full screen just on your computer. We will be making this PowerPoint available as a PDF on our website, and that is the napeequity.org site. As I mentioned, you can feel free to send questions through the chat box as we go along, and I will address them as we go. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. And again, I'd like to welcome everybody. So one of the goal of this presentation is to understand the subtle yet powerful messages in the mentoring process that can change a mentee's life. You'll notice that we're using the word mentee rather than protege. That's because when we think about the mentoring process, we think of it as a two-way experience, that the protege, particularly today, has a lot of really great insights and understandings that they can share with their mentor, as well as the mentor giving their insights and expertise towards a common goal. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is mentoring, why is mentoring important, what is the difference between mentee and protege, which I just touched on, and so we'll be using that term mentee quite a bit and giving a little bit more information about that. And what's different about our thinking around the mentoring process as we consider the NAPE micro-messaging framework. The National Alliance for Partnership and Equity has been around for decades, and we have been working in the field of access, equity, and diversity. And specifically, we have 4 areas of business development. Our largest area is our professional development, and 80% of our work is actually in the area of increasing access, equity, and diversity in classrooms, in educational organizations across the country. A foundational element of our training is this framework or model called PIPE-STEM. It's a program process for equity in STEM. It's important for all of our professional development because we believe that all educators are uniquely qualified to serve their students. And that goes for mentors as well, that you will never walk into a situation with a mentee and have everything in your toolbox. I want to, I'm hitting a little note here that says my volume is a little low, so let me do two things. Let me adjust the volume, and I'll also try and speak up a little more. Thank you. Let me know if it continues to be too low, and I'll try again. So what we're trying to do then is look at this process, this 5-step process, where you work in conjunction with other folks. In this case, we hope that your mentoring program includes other mentors that you can talk to. If you're a mentee, other mentees that you can talk to, as well as the relationship between the mentor and the mentee. We will always want to remind folks as the first step of the process that you begin to think about what is it exactly you're trying to achieve through your mentoring process. What information do you need to know about each other or the situation or the business or the career goals and education that will help you direct that mentee in a way that's going to be productive. As you think about the data, the information that you're collecting or exploring the relationship, you'll also want to be thinking about how you can discover more about each other as you're going along, creating more information, forming your own hypothesis, if you will, about how you can best help the student. What information do you have? What information can be gathered or shared from other resources? And then you share that information, but what's really important is to go back to that mentee and ask them, what additional information, how helpful was what I shared with you, to you? What additional information do you need? And as they apply that learning in their lives, or not, what can be gathered from that? Why didn't they share it? Why wasn't it useful? So that you continually learn from each other through the mentoring process about how you become a better mentor, how they become stronger in whatever the goals they have set for themselves, and how that relationship continues to build, grow, to support both of your goals. This is I'm trying to, okay, move the slide. It's a little stubborn there for a second. A second fundamental model that is critical to our product, our outcomes, is an understanding what's going on behind our relationships in communication. So all of our communication, no matter whether it be at work, in schools, with your spouse, or important relationships, have basic communications going on, not only at the macro level, what we overtly say, but also oftentimes very subtly and unintentionally or without our awareness. Those communications we refer to as micro messages. It's the ones that we all kind of know about, but we sort of forget about because they're so naturally occurring in our experience and how we communicate with others. We believe, NAPE believes, that those messages come from, oftentimes are shaped by our cultural stereotypes, that we are all part of this cultural experience, and from those cultural experiences, we develop biases. We share those biases with others. They may or may not be accurate. They may or may not be positive. But the point is that they all influence the way we see the world. Those biases enter into our relationships through our messaging, which I'll talk a little bit about before. But that's really important in the mentoring relationship because it's very important that we understand that as we communicate with others, we are sending and receiving messages that is influencing that relationship, and we really need to begin to pay attention to both what those messages are and what are the opportunities for using that messaging to really help your mentee to achieve their goals. It is, in fact, through that accumulation of those messages, the student or the colleague or the mentee has become has formed an opinion or a belief that shapes their self-efficacy. And that self-efficacy specifically is about whether if you start down a path you can be successful. It's beyond self-confidence. You might believe that you could finish, for instance, a college degree, but if you got the college degree, nobody would hire you for the job you were seeking. And if you don't believe you can be successful at the end of your degree, then the challenge becomes into the students or the colleagues thinking, why would I start down this path? Why would I begin if I don't see success at the end of it? Which doesn't have necessarily anything to do with their capacity to be successful. It is just a mindset that somehow we have created for individuals, this accumulation of messages. That belief in your ability to be successful, whether it be running a marathon or losing weight or getting a successful math degree, will shape an individual's behavior. That behavior then forms the cultural stereotypes that we can continue to share until we shake it up and begin to look at those stereotypes. Again, they aren't all negative. Many of them can be very positive. And so we take a few minutes to reflect on what those have meant to us in our lives. For instance, for our students, what we know from the research is that micro-affirmations, talk a little bit more about what that means in just a minute, but you can imagine a micro-affirmation being a positive micro-message will increase a student's willingness to take risks. If you believe you can be successful, if you hit a roadblock, well, you're probably much more likely to believe that you can overcome that roadblock if you've had enough affirmations from folks in the world and from your own experience that says, yep, you can be successful, just keep at it, solve the problem, don't see it as a block that you can't get around. So they're more willing to take risks. They'll be creative in their problem solving and innovative because it's like, I know I can succeed. I just need to figure it out. They're willing to increase their level of engagement in complex tasks and open-ended thinking, again, because they're so confident that they can be successful. They're more willing to think a little bit outside the box. They are more passionate about learning because they see how it will get them to their goal at the end of the day. So they're willing to sort of take some secondary elements that maybe are less pleasant, less enjoyable, because they're focused on their primary goal and their ability to be successful. And it expands their interest in non-traditional fields and their development in self-efficacy. So microaffirmations, those tiny little communications that are positive and affirming, can make a huge difference in a child's or an adult's life. It can shape how we think about the world and all the different components that make up our personal experiences. So let me talk a little bit more then. We see how important microaffirmations are, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about what are the components of micromessaging so that by the end of this presentation, you can walk away with an understanding of what these elements are in your own life. And today, as you begin to reflect, think about, how can am I accidentally sending micro inequities? How can I send more micro affirmations? And so it's really first paying attention to those small, subtle, semi-conscious messages that we all send and receive whenever we interact with others. Micro inequities are negative micro messages that we send that can sometimes make somebody feel devalued or slighted or discouraged or excluded. And again, they are often unintentional. And sometimes when somebody says, oh, you made me feel really badly, it surprises us. So we have to be aware that sometimes we're sending messages, micro inequities, even when we don't intend to. We can send them. It isn't our intent that's important, it's how it's received. We really have to pay attention to that, how it's received. You can begin to understand how important this would be in a mentoring relationship. Because what you want is always to be sending positive micro messages that cause the individual to feel valued, included, encouraged, and that ultimately builds that self-efficacy, and helps them to get to the behaviors that will help them to be successful. So now I'm going to just talk a few minutes about key micro-messaging elements. So what are those micro-messages? Well, we're pretty familiar with what is said, right? So you may remember if you have children or you work with young adults or teenagers, if you say something like, did you do your homework? You know, sometimes just asking that question can be so powerful and laden with meaning for individuals. What did you mean? Are you assuming I don't do my homework normally, or whatever, you know, that they may take from that message? So we think carefully um, about how we, and not only how we say things, but what we say, because we're always aware that there may be some nuances to what we're saying that we have to pay attention to. Paraverbal then is that same idea. What's the inflection in our tone when we ask the question? You know, are you going to wear that? Or are you going to wear that? Or whatever it is, you know, how are we saying it that would make a person feel or infer what your meaning might be? Body language. Oh gosh, we all understand this. If somebody shrugs their shoulders or shakes their head when you're expecting them to say yes and it looks like they're saying no, you know, we read a lot in that, and you know, I've heard many uh, studies that talk about how powerful nonverbal expression is, which is so challenging in a webinar because I can't see your faces. I, you know, don't have any of those body language to judge how it's going. So please use that chat so I can know if it's going well, if you're missing it, if I'm going too fast or too slow. But body language is important, and we tend to not pay a lot of attention to that. And it's something that when we're trying to really communicate with something really important, that we want to spend a little bit of time thinking about and pay attention to. Contextual is very important, particularly for students in what we consider non-traditional fields, and fields where they tend to be underrepresented, because there are often a lot of cultural artifacts or elements in the room, so to speak, that can make a person feel comfortable or uncomfortable, as if they belong. We don't always pay a lot of attention to that. One of the pieces that I use when I'm demonstrating this in a face-to-face meeting is I give a gentleman my purse, and I say to him, you know, this has got a lot of money in it. I'd like you to take this to my car. And he often will hold this purse out in front of him a little uncomfortably. And I'll say, you know, I said it had a lot of money in it, so I'd really like you to hold it closely. And I'll push the shoulder bag up on the top of his shoulder. And see, if he's not uncomfortable, there are people in the meeting that are uncomfortable for him. It is a bag. If it was a grocery bag, there would be a different response. Perhaps if it was some sort of a tool bag, there would be a different response. But there's just a natural discomfort because sometimes the gender stereotypes create this uncomfort, and people don't like to live in discomfort. So as we look at our classrooms, it might be useful, particularly when we talk about gender, but race, ethnicity, certainly when we think about students with disabilities, to try and get somebody from a different perspective to take a look at your room or your community or where you're asking people to participate or what you're asking them to do to make sure that it's not creating discomfort. And so context can be really important. Omission is what is said or not said or done. This is particularly important because depending on where people are in their development processes, and I'm sending us all back to thinking about our days of taking human development, it is true that at different ages peer engagement becomes more and less important. Certainly, finding somebody important in your life to be with, finding friends, building relationships are important. And if sometimes you're in a context where you are the only person of color, the only person with a certain disability, or perhaps a hearing impairment, something that pulls you out and makes you feel unique, if it isn't, um, if the focus isn't what you have in common with the other people in the room, but in fact what makes you different or unique in a way that is not necessarily positive, that might have been perceived as a deficit, then we have a situation where, again, we might create some discomfort. So how do we make sure, as a mentor, what advice can we give, what guidance can we share that helps our mentee to think about how to focus on what they have in common with other people and not what makes them different? And always thinking about, for instance, I'm always looking at, we all love, well, at least most of my students love pizza, or, bringing flowers to a meeting, or, talking about something we all have in common. What's your favorite kind of chocolate, or something? What do you think about this cold weather? Are you a cold weather person, warm weather person? There's so much that we have in common just as human beings that we really need to be focusing on. And the last one is just praise and criticism. And what I want to say about that is, I heard that the mic is cutting in and out. Greg, can you check that for me? Is that working? I've adjusted my mic a little bit.
Okay, I was going to stop you in a second. I didn't want to stop your train of thought. It does seem to cut in and out. I'm wearing headphones, so I probably don't hear it as much. But I don't know if maybe if you move it down towards your chin, maybe.
Yeah, I've got a headset on. Is that any better?
Seems better.
Testing, testing.
It's hard to say because it'll be okay for a while, and then it'll start cutting out. So why don't we try this, and
I'll keep an eye.
I'll jump in if we need to do something.
Okay, so I'll just summarize then. Hopefully you can see the screen. Pretty obvious then. Praise and criticism is just, we have to be really careful about how we use that. It's authentic, it's genuine, that it's meaningful, and not just thrown out without necessarily purpose. Is that working, Greg? Am I clear?
It seems better, yes.
Okay. So let's talk about why be a mentor. And really, this goes pretty quickly. To give back, to develop skills, to learn from your protege. And of course, there's lots of benefits to the protege. Sounding board, a support system, access to experience, to expand the professional network. And of course, ultimately, one of the things we want to see, NAPE wants to see, is more students from underrepresented populations going into college, and it can be a 2-year college or get a certification, a 4-year college, some sort of advanced education, going into a STEM or non-traditional career, areas where there are lots of openings that require skills, offer high wages, and certainly employers are looking for good employees with the skills and that they need. So I'm also going to just touch briefly on types of mentoring relationships, because this is important. They are all uniquely different. The reason I'm touching on this is because we have to understand that when we talk about micro-messaging, I've broken it down into 6 categories, but each one of these relationships has a different feel, a different characteristic that makes how you message very important. For instance, formal might be sorted out or set up by an employer or a school or college. Informal tends to happen naturally. Now, Catalyst, which is an organization that looks at women in business and has done some great research. I encourage you to take a look at their website. Just Google Catalyst. They focus on how important informal is, particularly because it's not just the mentoring, but the advocating for others when you're not in the room. So your mentor at a workplace, for instance, has the opportunity to go into a meeting, and when there's an opportunity that arises, they would be the one that says, hey, have you thought about Susan for this opportunity? Because she would be wonderful. Why don't we give her a chance? She's got great potential. So formal sometimes seems more about giving information and guidance so you as an individual can go out and advocate for yourself. Informal has this additional element of advocacy, and that can be even more powerful. So just sort of keeping that in mind, you will often want to look for yourself an informal mentor as well as participate in formal mentoring. The second one, student versus faculty, of course, that's very important because faculty have a lot to offer students, particularly those who are the first generation in college. Keeping in mind, however, that faculty have power and students have to be very cautious what they share. So if you are a faculty member in a mentoring role, you may need to really set some guidelines or boundaries or at least explain to the student what's appropriate in that relationship and take that pretty seriously so that students understand when they're sharing information that there are some guidelines they need to pay attention to. One-on-one, of course, is always better, but it's very time-consuming and it takes a lot more responsibility and reliability. People have to engage more, but boy, it's certainly powerful for those micro messages. It gives you a lot of opportunities to pay attention to providing lots of affirmations so they can accumulate those affirmations. And it also allows you to build a relationship where you can create a safe space, and the student or the individual colleague that you're working with has the opportunity to really hear what you have to say. Because building that relationship is so important. Group mentoring, obviously very useful, but you're not going to get the personal messages. But there's still a lot that can be gained from a general goal that a group may have from a mentor. Tends to end up being a little bit more advisory than mentoring, but also really important and powerful. E-mentoring is generally done online, and of course, and can be useful. But the challenge is, again, you're missing a lot of the micro messages, and so it's not as effective, but still something you need to kind of pay attention to. Now, if you use Skype or, something like this, where you have the opportunity to use the camera, you can add to that. But it's just different kinds, again, different kinds of messages you need to pay attention to. All of this brings us to what are the 4 stages of mentoring. And the one I was talking about is building trust. Understanding how micromessaging works and the mentoring relationship and putting those two together is fundamental for building trust. Additional elements that perhaps we could talk about on another webinar are the importance of exploring possibilities, continuing the cycle that we talked about a little bit at the beginning of the webinar, that multiple stages of continuous improvement, and then how to really navigate those rough spots when things get challenging, not only for the student, but also for you, or not just for the mentee, but also for the mentor. What are issues around accessibility for you or for your mentee or the mentor? What are some of the challenges they're experiencing in their life that may be related to their goal or unrelated to their goal, etc. So as we begin to think about this, then, how we move forward on building this trust, in a sense, we have to always remember what is our goal, and trying to make sure we stay focused on moving towards that goal. And I would argue that one of the key elements that we don't often think about, sort of the message behind all this, is that you're not just focusing on how to get the student or the individual to be successful in their job, in their education, in their personal journey, but you also are having to pay attention to this issue of self-efficacy. Because if their goal is to enroll in a particular course or be successful in getting a degree in IT or whatever it is, you have this dual role as the mentor to pay attention to this element of self-efficacy, of affirming it's not just that this is how you get a degree or this is how you get a certification or this is how you talk to your faculty advisor or your boss, but you can do this. I believe in you. I see within you the skills and the tools necessary to be successful. And that's how, when we talk about building trust and the power of micro messages, we begin to think about this. Now let me stop for just a second and ask a question. And I hope at the top of the screen you see a little hand raise. I would love it if you would raise your hand, click on this. If you can for a moment imagine from a mentor or some important influencer in your life, a moment when a micro affirmation made a difference in your life. Can you think about that for a moment and just click on that mouse? Let's see if we can all take a moment and think about that. Okay. A couple people have said yes. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to put your hand down, and I'm going to ask you the next question. Raise your hand if anybody who was really important in your life, somewhere along from childhood, any point in your life, said something powerfully, negatively, that shaped your life. And it doesn't necessarily have to be negative with a negative outcome. It could have been a negative that came out with, I'm going to, show them. But it was something really negative that you still remember all these years later that really shaped your life. Raise your hand if you can imagine an experience like that. It can be with a spouse, with a parent, with a teacher, a friend. Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So I wanted you to take a moment to think about that because, and you can put your hand down. That I appreciate that. I just want to make sure if you raise your hand again, I know it's because you have a question for me, and that's fine. I wanted to talk a little bit about feedback because oftentimes somebody said something that was probably, if you look back on it, well-intentioned. And we want that feedback to be received in the best way possible. So if you have something important to say that can help your class, your mentee, your colleague, somebody you're in a relationship with, and there are certain guidelines you need to be thinking about in order to make sure that it comes across in the affirmative. So one is that you got to make sure you're sitting in the right place. You're in the right venue. It's the right time. You're not sitting in a group in a classroom, obviously with a lot of other people, or whatever. So I'm sure you understand that point. That it's not coming out of left field. Remember, you have a wonderful relationship, hopefully, with this mentee. They're expecting the conversation to go in a direction. It's not going in that direction as you might expect. So you want to be making sure that you're building towards positive experience, even if the comment is critical. So, for instance, I think this didn't go very well. Your presentation, I watched it. I think that the presentation could have been more clear. Like, for instance, shame about the IT for my presentation, that it's cutting in and out. It could have gone better if you'd done this or that to check your mic ahead of time, and we did, but you know what I'm saying? You want to be authentic in your criticism, but you want to do it in a way that says, and I know next time with this guidance you're going better because there's so much that you do well. Let me also point out what really went well for you.
Claudia,
Putting it in a positive. Yeah.
you were cutting out there again, so I don't know if your headset moved or something.
Uh, yeah. No, I think that the is it. How's that? Is that working?
Sounds good.
Okay. I think it's just the cosmos. I have no idea. Yeah. Keep tapping on me, Greg. So just being positive, being concrete, following up as promised. So again, the verbal, the nonverbal behaviors, if you say you're going to follow up with a mentee, if you don't do that, it can be devastating. And they read all kinds of things into behaviors that may be completely incorrect. If you don't call them back because you had to run and take care of somebody or something came up, you just need to let them know, gosh, sorry, something came up. Because otherwise, sometimes students particularly will infer they don't care about me, their life is too busy for me, which could be the furthest thing from the truth, of course. And even if you do get really busy, it's important to just say, I have things I cannot get out of. You're really important to me. I'm calling you just to let you know how important you are to me, and I apologize. There's a fire going on. I got to go put it out. Those are such small but powerful pieces that we just have to pay attention to. Also remember though, as we talked about at the beginning, this is a two-way street. Help them to give feedback. Your opportunity too is to help build that relationship and experience a relationship where they learn to give as well as get. And to the extent that you can take good critique from them, help them give it to you, you learn and grow also. So again, giving it well and making sure the PowerPoint moves when it doesn't want to, and receiving it well. Listening, being open-minded, asking for clarification, staying calm, put some notes down, remembering that young people, particularly if you're working with young people or people with less experience in a particular job, it may not be that that they're being insensitive. You can help them learn about those micro messages by explaining it to them. I know you really wanted to help me, but let me tell you about micro messages and how this came across to me. And I just want you to know if you take this into a classroom with a faculty member or at work, it might also backfire on you. So let me help you communicate better. Really important. Okay, so what I want to give you some homework. Okay, and that we still have a few slides to go, but I want to just have you thinking about, as you leave today, and as you are a mentor, as you work with mentors, or as you are a mentee, thinking about what are your attributes. We think about our attributes in terms of our job skills, our education, our whatever, our experiences, but there's so much more to that, to who you are as an individual that you're bringing to that relationship, or that you would expect others to bring to that relationship. I'm a good listener. I care about people. I I like to empower people. What are the things that when your friends talk about you? What is it they say? You do that really well. Those are also your gifts. What are your gifts? Think about that, because it's important that you bring those to every relationship that you're in, even your mentees. Those are your, communications. Those are your messages. Who are you as an individual? And so it's so important, if you're going to build a mentoring relationship, to be authentic and genuine. And this is important, particularly for students who are from underrepresented populations, because they've probably heard a million times, you can be successful here, but they have never received it. And so your biggest challenge is to be as authentic and real and genuine as you can be. Your best way to communicate is through micro-affirmations. And those micro-affirmations tell that student or that colleague something about you, and then they can be more comfortable sharing and moving in towards safe space so that when you say something, they will know you are saying it because you care about them. And that is really the foundation of NAPE's message. Education will move forward. Students will be successful when they build self-efficacy, and they will build self-efficacy when one caring adult takes the time and the experiences and brings it to the table to show them that they care, that they believe, that they can be successful, and that communications comes through those important micro-affirmations. So you have to also be present. You have to be authentic. You have to be genuine. It's a little bit of a risk sometimes out there, but that's really the foundation of a good, strong, successful mentoring relationship. What I'd like you to take away today is that mentoring benefits all parties in the relationship: mentor, mentee, the institution, and ultimately our economy. Micro-messaging is a key communication within all relationships, but especially those relationships and when an imbalance of power exists and the outcomes are crucial. We have to really pay attention. As I said, faculty to student, boss to mentee, if you will. Beginning a mentoring relationship with honest vulnerability can set the tone for the rest of the relationship. Lessons learned will inform your future mentoring relationships. Keeping in mind internal barriers, such as stereotype, threat. And by the way, if you are not familiar with some of these terms, I would encourage you to visit the NAPE website because we have webinars on all of these topics: stereotype, threat, attribution theory, self-efficacy. And it allows you to focus attention and direct students to appropriate strategies. And we talked a little bit about the 4 phases of mentoring. And I'd love to look back at the other 3 and talk about those at another time. We want to develop a relationship. It's the first step. It only happens when you build that relationship. Only happens when you're paying attention to your micro messages in a meaningful way. And once that relationship is built, then you can really begin to look at how you can achieve your goals. And then, of course, coach, and coach. All relationship will meet with barriers. Fixing the situation is not the mentor's job. I didn't really talk about this, but I think it's just a takeaway. The relationship is the critical piece. Ultimately, whatever needs to be achieved is the responsibility of achieving the goal is the responsibility of the mentee. For instance, if it's a job they're working on or a class they want to finish successfully or a program, they're going to have to do it. And you won't always be successful. But that's okay, because sometimes that student or that colleague will go in a different direction from the learning that they took away. And you'll be with them as they take that learning away to the next step in a safe, supportive relationship. So yes, offering support and resources, it says is, but the best thing you can offer is your support. Little typo, I think, there. We'll have to correct that. But feedback is certainly a two-way street. You want to always remember there's lots to learn, and there is a lot that we can give. Okay, that's actually where I want to finish. We don't have a formal post-workshop evaluation. We'd like to do now is open up and see if folks have comments, questions, but we would also like to be able to send you a brief evaluation through an email once this is over, so you can be looking forward to receiving that. And I hopefully that you found this information useful, and wondering if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or post something in the chat. If not, I will, oh, I see some folks are typing, so I'm excited to see what we have. And anybody who has to jump off, I just want to say thank you very much for joining with me today. I hope this was useful. Again, we will be posting this webinar on the NAPE website, www.napeequity.org. I'll just post that in the chat room. Chat box. Okay, how do we go about, I see an email, wait a minute, lost it. Okay, just bouncing around a little bit here, so I'm trying to these. So how do we go about nominating someone to serve as a mentor? Well, I think first off you have to make sure that they are willing to be a mentor, because it is, oh, you mean through the Million Women Mentor site? You know, that's a really good question. I can find out and send that out as additional information. But of course, I would always encourage you to check with a mentor before you nominate them, because it is a really important responsibility. It's not something you want to drop in and then 2 months later go, gosh, I'm too busy, see you later, because that can also send a really powerful message to the mentee and be pretty, pretty harsh, unfortunately. So just we can certainly go to the Million Women Mentor site and get more information, though. How can you harness the passion that faculty have to mentor? What a great question. I tend to do some micro-message. You know, that's a really good question. And so I will say that to the question, which is, how do you get faculty who want to mentor in front of mentees but make sure it's a positive experience? That is so true. We actually, so I ran a mentoring program for a number of years. I actually started and ran a mentoring program that was funded through the National Science Foundation when I worked at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County Center for Women in IT. And one of the lessons learned, and we learned a lot of lessons through that program, is that as we send students out, both to faculty and into businesses with internships, they actually can come back and have had such a horrible experience that they decide they're never going to go into the field. That well-intentioned people will give advice, and the advice is so harsh that it actually pushes people in the other direction. And so we have to be really careful. We have a very brief webinar that we developed that's not currently available, but I think we need to revisit it, which is that we definitely want to make sure that we're telling our colleagues to be careful about sending micro affirmations. There is some work, and I think there's shortly going to be available a STEM course, online course that folks can take, but also I'm trying to think if we have some webinars which I can share with you about how to message really positively, particularly around STEM and CTE. I think we can take a look at our website. There may be some good information there. But I would suggest that you do it in a generic way and talk about how to stay positive with students, because it's a pretty complex. It is complex. You don't want to turn them off from mentoring or being positive or staying in the classroom or working with students, but at the same time, you want to make sure you help them not to do, not to do more harm than good. It's challenging. So yes, Sarah, good point. Right, very good point. So you don't want to say to students, you're really smart. You don't want to affirm people's specific attributes. You're a smart person, or you're not a smart person, or something. It's just, wow. It's more about, did you work hard, or I saw you really working hard. It's more about the specific action that you want to be supportive of. What did you do to be successful? What were the behaviors that helped you achieve your goal, as opposed to what are the attributes you possess? And that goes back to the whole idea behind either you have it or you don't have it, you know, and if the self-efficacy is I don't have it, then the challenge is that if you don't have it, then you can't get it. You're never going to be successful. This goes back to a little bit to this whole idea behind fixed versus growth mindset. You're either born with it or you're not born with it. It has this fixed idea. And in fact, it's this whole idea around you can be successful if if you just really work hard. We had one faculty member, actually teacher in Baltimore County Public School this past year, who did a micro-messaging capstone project and just provided her students positive feedback. I mean, she gave them, some critical review, but also gave them very positive guidelines of what they could do to improve. Go to the tutoring center, keep a journal, work with another student, develop a study group. And she gave them very concrete, specific activities that they could do that they then did. And then she was able to say, your grade went up because they did, the grades did go up, and this is the result of your taking this action. So if now she gives them a next action, they're more likely to take it and continue being successful. Great point, Sarah. Okay. Other comments, questions, thoughts people want to share with each other? Here's the thing. I know I look at some of the names on here, and I know that many of you know way more about some of these areas than I do, or have a lot of experience to contribute. So I thank you for being here and listening to me, and hope that you, celebrate the fact that you're continuing in this work and joining us on the journey. Any other comments, questions, issues? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I hope if, one of the best parts of this is to think about the reflecting. I know that there's going to be a number of different programs around the Million Women Mentors. NAPE is excited to be a partner with that group. I know many of you are also partnering with Million Women Mentors, and we're looking forward to learning what everybody else is doing and really building capacity and moving forward on helping more women move into non-traditional careers, areas where they're high wage, high skill fields where there are in fact lots of openings. So we are really delighted to